Her in-laws ripped her dress at the wedding. The actions of a billionaire guest. She didn't scream when the sound of fabric tore through the music. Under the golden lights of a Beverly Hills wedding, a woman's dress was ripped apart, her dignity shredded before hundreds of wealthy guests. And beside her stood her little girl, clutching her hand, whispering through tears, "Mommy, why are they angry?" That woman was Isabella Hayes, once loved, now humiliated by the man who promised forever. That night, she lost everything except her courage. Tell me, what would you have done in her place? Welcome to Emotional Echoes, a channel where emotions come alive and every story leaves a lasting echo in your heart. Please subscribe to Emotional Echoes channel. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers so more souls can feel these stories. Stay with my video till the very end and let me know where you're watching from so I can see how far this story spreads. Now, let me tell you what really happened under those white roses. Isabella Hayes had promised herself she would never see Carter Whitmore again. Yet here she was, standing at the edge of his new wedding, with her little girl's hand in hers. She wasn't there for him. She came because Ella had asked why her father never came to birthdays or Christmas. Bella had run out of lies to protect him. Her heart beat fast, not from love, but from the quiet rage of a woman who had survived too much. Ella looked up at her with trusting eyes that didn't know betrayal. That was the only strength Bella needed to walk inside. Inside, everything smelled like money and roses. Laughter rose and fell like waves, polished and hollow. Bella's gaze found Carter near the altar, holding hands with Lydia Cross, the woman who used to message her about keeping a marriage strong. He looked older, colder, but still devastatingly handsome in a way that made her stomach twist with memories. She took a breath. She hadn't come to make a scene, just to face what she'd once thought was love. Miranda Whitmore saw her first. The older woman's voice sliced through the music like glass. "Well, look who crawled back from the past." Bella met her eyes calmly and said she came to wish them happiness. Miranda laughed, the kind of laugh that drew stares from every corner of the garden. Lydia turned, her smile all teeth. "Happiness? You mean revenge?" Carter stood frozen. Bella saw the flicker of guilt on his face and knew he wouldn't defend her. He never had. Miranda moved closer, pearls glinting at her throat. Her perfume was sharp, her anger sharper. She reached out and snatched the small bouquet from Bella's hands, throwing it aside. "You'll never be part of this family. Not now, not ever." Her voice rose until every guest turned. Then her fingers gripped the soft fabric of Bella's dress and pulled. The sound of tearing silk ripped through the air like thunder. For a second, time stopped. The laughter died. The crowd gasped, but no one moved to help. Lydia covered her mouth to hide a grin. Carter looked away, pretending not to see. Bella's body trembled, her face burning. She knelt quickly, trying to shield Ella behind her, her voice cracking. "It's okay, baby. It's okay." Ella's small voice broke through the silence, confused and scared. "Mommy, why are they angry?" The question sliced deeper than the humiliation. Bella's throat tightened, but she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Because some people forget what kindness looks like, sweetheart." She stood up slowly, the torn fabric clinging to her legs, her dignity the only thing she still owned. She walked to the front, past Miranda, past the whispers. Her voice shook, but carried across the garden. "You're right, Mrs. Whitmore. I don't belong here, but there's one person who does." She turned toward Carter and gently placed a hand on Ella's shoulder. "Carter, this is your daughter. She deserves a father who isn't ashamed of her." The words fell heavy into the silence. The orchestra stopped mid-note. Guests exchanged shocked glances. Someone's phone clattered to the ground. Miranda screamed that it was a lie, calling for security, her face red with fury. Bella didn't back down. She lifted Ella into her arms, her voice steady now. "If no man here has the courage to be her father, then maybe someone else will." From the back of the crowd, a deep voice answered, calm and sure. Then, "Let me." Heads turned. Alexander Reed, The billionaire guest of honor stepped forward through the stunned crowd. His gaze locked on Bella, then on the little girl hiding her face against her mother's neck. "I'll be that man," he said softly. And for the first time that night, Bella didn't feel small. For a few seconds after Alexander Reed spoke, no one moved. The garden that had been filled with music and laughter only minutes earlier now felt frozen, as if the world itself had stopped breathing. Then came the whispers, sharp and hungry, cutting through the silence like glass. Phones were raised, flashes went off, and people leaned in, desperate to capture the moment when a billionaire declared himself the father of another man's child. Miranda Whitmore was the first to break. Her voice rose above the murmurs, high and furious. "What are you doing, Mr. Reed? This is outrageous." Alexander didn't even look at her. He simply removed his black coat and placed it gently around Bella's shoulders, covering the torn fabric that had exposed her humiliation. "You deserve respect," he said quietly, his tone calm but final. His eyes fell to the little girl, clutching her mother's hand, her face red from crying. "And she deserves a father who stays." Carter stepped forward, voice cracking with disbelief. "You can't just claim her." Alexander turned toward him slowly, his face unreadable. "Then why didn't you?" The words hit harder than any slap. The crowd gasped. Carter's mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked at his mother for help, but Miranda's face was pale with rage. Miranda jabbed a finger at Bella, shouting that this was all a setup, a cheap performance to gain sympathy. But no one was laughing now. Alexander's voice cut through the chaos, calm and steady like a man used to command. 10 years ago, my wife walked out on me," he said, eyes still on Bella and the child. "She left me and our son to start over with someone younger. Since that day, I've watched my boy grow up without a mother." The crowd grew quiet. Even the cameras stopped clicking. Alexander looked down at Ella, his voice softening. "Maybe God is giving me a second chance. Maybe this little girl is meant to have the family my son lost." His words were not loud, but they carried through the air, heavy with honesty. Behind him, near the edge of the garden, Ryan Reed stood still, his hands in his pockets. His expression was hard to read, but there was something in his eyes that looked like pain. Bella stared at Alexander, as if trying to understand whether this man was serious. Gratitude, fear, and disbelief tangled inside her like a storm. She had walked into this place to face her past, not to find someone standing beside her. For the first time in years, someone was defending her without expecting anything in return. Ella peeked out from behind her mother, studying Alexander with wide eyes, too young to understand, but somehow sensing safety. Carter tried again, louder this time, his words breaking apart. "You can't just walk in here," and Alexander raised a hand, stopping him cold. "You had your chance, Mr. Whitmore. You chose silence. Now the world knows what that cost you." Miranda shouted something about reputation, about money, but no one listened. The guests had turned from amused spectators into uneasy witnesses. They could all feel the power shift in the air. Alexander looked back at Bella. His voice softened, and for the first time, it carried something like compassion. "You're not alone anymore. Whatever they took from you tonight, they won't take your dignity." Bella's lips trembled, her breath unsteady. She nodded, barely able to speak. Around them, the crowd stayed frozen, unsure whether to clap, whisper, or simply disappear. Ella pressed her face into Bella's shoulder. Bella's arms wrapped around her, holding her close as if to promise that no one would ever hurt them again. The wedding that had started as a display of wealth had turned into something else entirely. Beneath the white roses and broken pride, two families scarred by loss had just begun to find their way towards something that looked like healing. By morning, the world had already seen it. The video of Alexander Reed stepping between Bella and the Whitmore family had spread like wildfire. The caption read, "Billionaire defends single mother at ex-husband's wedding." Millions watched it, shared it, argued over it. Some called it heroic, others said it was staged. To strangers online, it was just another drama. To Bella, it was the beginning of another storm. Miranda Whitmore appeared on a few talk shows, painting herself and her son as victims. She called Bella manipulative, a woman using her child for sympathy. Carter stood beside her, face blank, saying nothing. Within days, his company's investors started pulling out. Contracts vanished. The Whitmore name became a punchline, but none of that made Bella's life easier. Outside her apartment, flashes exploded whenever she opened the door. Cameras hid behind parked cars. Strangers shouted questions she didn't want to hear. At night, even when the street was quiet, she could still see bursts of white light behind her eyelids, as if the cameras were still there. Sleep stopped coming. Every time Ella rolled over in bed, Bella's body tensed, waiting for another knock, another spotlight. One morning, she walked Ella to preschool, only to see two parents whispering and looking away. That afternoon, the principal called her in. They spoke in careful, rehearsed sentences about the school's reputation. Bella nodded, too tired to argue. She packed her things, walked home in silence, and didn't tell Ella why she wouldn't be going back to work. That night, she sat on the floor beside the window, lights off, just listening to the hum of traffic. Ella was asleep, clutching her teddy bear, her breathing soft and steady. Bella stared at the faint reflection of herself in the glass, a woman she barely recognized. The next afternoon, a knock sounded at the door. When she opened it, Alexander Reed stood there. He wasn't surrounded by cameras or assistants, just holding a paper bag and a small bouquet of daisies. He looked out at the reporters across the street, his jaw tightening. Without saying a word, he took a sheet of paper, wrote, "No cameras, private residence," and taped it to Bella's door. The reporters murmured, but began to back away. Then he turned to her, voice low but kind. "I brought milk for her and flowers for you." Bella stood frozen. She hadn't expected him to come, not here, not like this. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "I don't want pity." Alexander shook his head. "This isn't pity, it's respect." He stepped inside, placing the bag on the counter, then looked around her small apartment. It was clean but tired, a space held together by love and exhaustion. He told her the noise outside would fade soon, that she didn't owe anyone shame for surviving. Then, softer, he said, "My son needs to see what a good woman looks like." Bella blinked, unsure what to say. The words hit deeper than he knew. Ella peeked from the hallway, her tiny voice breaking the tension. "Mommy, who is that man?" Bella smiled faintly. "Someone kind. Sweetheart." Alexander crouched down, meeting the child's eyes. "Nice to meet you, Ella." He extended his hand, and she shyly placed hers in his. In that moment, the harsh world outside felt far away. For the first time since the wedding, Bella's chest loosened. Alexander stood to leave, pausing by the door. He nodded toward the paper sign he'd taped there. It should keep them away for a while. Bella followed his gaze, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled, small but real. When the door closed behind him, she touched the flowers on the counter and whispered, "Thank you." That night, when she finally lay beside Ella, the lights from outside stayed silent, and for the first time in days, Bella slept without fear. They sat in the quiet of Bella's small apartment, the city's hum fading into the background. The world outside kept spinning gossip, headlines, judgment, but here, time seemed to pause. Alexander's voice was steady, low, carrying the weight of memories that had never healed. 10 years ago, my wife left. Her name was Margot. She said she wanted to feel young again. She took her pearls, her passport, and a suitcase. Not our son. His gaze drifted to the window, where distant lights flickered like fading stars. "Ryan was 17, he said softly. He waited every night by that same window for her to come back. I told him to stop waiting, but I never stopped myself. Money filled the house, but it never filled the silence. He thought it was enough to keep busy, but work doesn't replace love. It only hides the wound." Bella didn't interrupt. She watched his hands as he spoke, large, controlled, but restless. She recognized that kind of pain. It wasn't loud. It was the quiet ache that stays after everything else is gone. She said gently that she understood what it meant to be the one left behind, cleaning up the mess of someone else's choices. Her story came out in pieces, each one slower than the last. How Carter had once been gentle, how she believed him when he said family mattered more than reputation. The first time she told him she was pregnant, he smiled, then didn't call for 3 days. And when he finally came back, it wasn't to celebrate, it was to say his mother wanted to talk. Bella's voice trembled, but she didn't cry. She described the day Miranda showed up, pearls, perfume, and a checkbook. She slid a piece of paper across the table like a deal. "Enough to start over," she said. "Enough to forget him." Bella's hands tightened on her cup. "I tore it in half," she whispered. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Only the soft clink of porcelain filled the room as Bella set the teacup down on the saucer. The faint tap echoed, delicate but final. The silence that followed was heavy but not empty. It was a silence that carried respect. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, as if she were reliving it. "I gave birth alone, no family, no flowers, just the smell of disinfectant and the sound of my own heartbeat." She paused, staring at her hands. "For a while, I thought I couldn't do it. But then she cried. That small, angry cry, it pulled me back. That's how I knew I'd survive." Alexander's expression shifted, a mix of sorrow and admiration. "You did it on your own," he said softly. "That takes a strength most people never learn." Bella smiled faintly, a tired smile, but real. "Maybe strength isn't something you're born with. Maybe it's what's left after you've been broken." Outside, rain began tapping softly against the glass, filling the quiet spaces their words had left behind. Alexander leaned back, his voice gentler now. Ryan grew up cold. "He works like a machine, doesn't laugh, doesn't let anyone close. Sometimes, I think he's still waiting for someone to come back." Bella looked at him for a long time, her eyes thoughtful. "Maybe he doesn't need her to come back," she said. "Maybe he just needs to see that love can stay." Alexander met her gaze and nodded slowly. "Maybe." Days later, when Bella and Ella visited his home, the mansion didn't feel like power or wealth. It felt like something trying to remember how to live again. Ella's laughter echoed through marble halls that had forgotten joy. Ryan appeared in the doorway, polite but distant. He wasn't ready for warmth. But when Ella ran to him, holding up her toy bear and asking if he wanted to play, something inside him shifted. He hesitated, then knelt, awkwardly taking the toy. His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. Alexander saw it from the stairs. For a man who had waited years for that sound, it felt like sunlight breaking through after too many winters. Bella stood beside him, silent. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The sound of a child's laughter had said everything that broken families could still find ways to heal. And sometimes, hope didn't arrive with fireworks. It came quietly, in moments like this. The lawsuit came only weeks later. Miranda Whitmore filed for defamation, claiming Bella had ruined her family's reputation with lies. The irony almost made Bella laugh, but there was nothing funny about the stress that followed. Reporters camped outside her door again, and online headlines screamed about the billionaire's woman. Alexander found out before she even told him. That same night, he arrived at her apartment with his legal team, his expression calm but his jaw tight. He said simply that she would not face this alone. The courtroom smelled of old wood and tension. Rows of spectators filled the benches, journalists whispering, cameras waiting outside. Miranda sat with her lawyers, her pearl necklace gleaming against her pale skin, her posture perfect, but her hands trembling slightly. Carter was beside her, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Bella sat across the room, in a modest navy dress, her hands folded in her lap. Alexander sat behind her, silent, a steady presence like a wall she could lean on. When the judge entered, the room fell still. Miranda's attorney spoke first, his tone smooth and practiced. He described Bella as a manipulative woman who had fabricated a child and a scandal to gain attention. But when he finished, Alexander's lead counsel stood. The man was calm, older, the kind of lawyer who didn't need to raise his voice to command attention. He said this case wasn't about money or image. It was about dignity, about the truth that lives in the eyes of a mother defending her child. Then he played the video. The screen flickered to life, the courtroom filled with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses from that night. And then it showed Miranda tearing Bella's dress while hundreds watched. The gasps that followed were sharp, like air leaving the room. Some people turned away. Others stared at Miranda, disbelief written all over their faces. Carter's silence in the video was worse than shouting. It exposed everything. When the video ended, no one spoke. Even the judge took a moment before looking up. Alexander's lawyer walked closer to the jury box. He said a woman who stands up for her child doesn't need to prove her worth. The video already did that for her. He paused, letting the words settle. Every person in this room knows the difference between truth and cruelty. Only one side chose cruelty. Miranda's lawyer tried to object, but it was useless. The damage was done. Miranda's face had lost all its color. Carter looked smaller than he ever had, his shoulders slumped, his eyes glued to the floor. The judge leaned forward, her voice firm but not harsh. The court finds in favor of Isabella Hayes. She ordered Miranda to pay damages and issue a public apology. For a moment, Bella couldn't breathe. It wasn't victory she felt, it was release. Her body trembled as tears filled her eyes. She looked back at Alexander, who met her gaze with quiet approval. He didn't smile, but his nod said everything. Justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered softly that the truth had survived. As the courtroom emptied, Bella stood still, letting the noise fade. Reporters shouted her name, flashes went off, but she didn't hear them. She only felt Alexander's hand rest lightly on her shoulder as he said they could finally go home. For the first time in years, she believed that word actually meant something. A few weeks after the trial, Alexander invited Bella and Ella to a small celebration at his home. It was Ryan's birthday, though he hadn't planned anything for himself. Alexander said it would be simple, just family, no reporters, no business people, only laughter and peace. Bella hesitated at first, unsure if she belonged in a house like his, but Alexander's voice on the phone carried quiet warmth. He said the mansion had been too silent for too long, and maybe it was time to let some light back in. The Reed estate was nothing like the Whitmore's marble showpiece. It was grand, yes, but it felt alive. There were wild flowers instead of polished bouquets, and sunlight spilled through open windows instead of chandeliers. Ella ran through the garden barefoot, chasing butterflies between the rose bushes. Her laughter carried across the lawn, bright and unfiltered. It filled spaces that had once been empty. Ryan stood near the terrace, pretending to check his phone, but he couldn't help glancing at the little girl again and again. She laughed the way his mother used to, he said softly, almost to himself. Alexander, who was pouring lemonade nearby, looked at him and smiled. Maybe she's the laughter we both needed. Ryan didn't answer, but his expression softened in a way Alexander hadn't seen in years. Bella helped arrange the table under a canopy of soft lights. The evening air smelled faintly of rain and jasmine. Everything felt strangely peaceful. There was no performance here, no eyes waiting to judge. She looked around at Ryan, at Alexander, at her daughter playing freely, and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. It was fragile, but real. When the candles on the cake were lit, Ella clapped so hard she almost blew them out herself. Ryan chuckled quietly, his guard falling for a moment as he let her hand him a piece of cake. Bella caught the small moment between them and smiled. Later, as the night grew quieter, most of the lights dimmed and soft music played from the garden speakers. Alexander found Bella standing by the balcony, looking up at the stars. For a moment, he simply stood beside her without saying anything. The world felt suspended between breaths. He said loneliness wasn't about being alone. It was about feeling unseen, even when surrounded by people. Bella nodded, understanding more than she wanted to admit. He turned slightly toward her. Healing, he said quietly, isn't about forgetting. It's about allowing someone in. She didn't know what to say. The words sat between them like a truth too fragile to touch. She looked up at him, and in the soft golden light, his face didn't look like the powerful man from the headlines. It looked like someone who had also lost pieces of himself and was learning how to live again. Their eyes met, and the silence that followed was tender, not awkward. From the garden, Ella's laughter rang out again, joined by Ryan's hesitant voice. Alexander smiled faintly. Bella did too. Something in that sound wrapped around both of them like a promise, small but steady. It wasn't love yet, not in the way the world defined it. It was something deeper, the beginning of belonging. Carter came first. It was a grey morning when Bella heard the soft knock on her door. She opened it to find him standing there, thinner than she remembered, his suit wrinkled, his tie missing. The arrogance that once filled every gesture was gone. His eyes looked hollow, the kind of empty that only regret could carve. He said he had lost everything. Investors, friends, his company. He said he only wanted one thing now, to see his daughter. Bella stood in the doorway, silent for a long moment. Ella was in the living room, drawing pictures with colored pencils, humming softly to herself. Bella looked at her, and then back at him. "You already did," she said quietly. "You saw her every day for 2 years and never noticed." Carter's eyes filled with tears. He tried to speak, but no words came. She didn't hate him. She just didn't care anymore. That, she realized, was the real ending of love. He asked if Ella would ever know who he was. Bella's voice stayed steady. "She will know the truth, but she will also know who stood beside her when you didn't." Carter nodded slowly, his shoulders collapsing, as if the words had finally finished breaking him. He turned to leave, and for the first time, Bella didn't feel pain watching him go. Only peace. Later that week, Miranda showed up at Alexander's office. She looked older, the sharp confidence in her voice now replaced with trembling desperation. She said the bank was foreclosing on their home, that the family name was in ruins. She begged him to stop the legal pressure, to let her keep what little they had left. Alexander listened without interrupting. His eyes were steady but not cruel. He told her fairness had a way of coming full circle, that the night she stripped Bella of dignity in front of hundreds, she had set her own fate in motion. He said he hadn't destroyed her family. Her pride had. Miranda's lips quivered, and tears spilled down her face. She whispered that she wished she could take it all back. Alexander stood, his voice calm. "The best apology is change." Then he turned and walked her to the door. When she left, the silence in his office felt heavy. He thought of Bella again, of how she never once asked for revenge. She never gloated, never even spoke of the Whitmores unless asked. She carried her pain with quiet grace, transforming it into something that lifted others instead of crushing them. That kind of strength was rare, and it humbled him. That evening, Alexander stood by the balcony of his estate, looking down at the garden where Ella was playing. Bella sat nearby, reading a book, her hair moving gently in the breeze. The golden light touched her face, soft and unguarded. She looked peaceful, not because her life had been easy, but because she had chosen not to let bitterness win. Alexander watched her for a long moment, feeling something shift inside him. Admiration had turned into something deeper, something he hadn't felt in years. He didn't say it out loud. He didn't need to. It was enough to know that grace, real grace, had a quiet power of its own. 1 year later, the same garden that once echoed with cruel laughter was filled with soft music and white roses. The air smelled of hope instead of judgment. Children from orphanages ran around in new shoes, their laughter rising above the hum of conversation. Alexander had turned the place of Bella's humiliation into a symbol of second chances. The sign at the gate read Hope Gala, hosted by the Reed Foundation. Bella arrived quietly, holding Ella's hand. The little girl wore a white dress sprinkled with petals, her eyes wide with wonder. Bella looked around, remembering the night she had been torn apart here. But the pain no longer burned. It had been replaced by something gentler, like peace finally finding its way home. When Alexander saw them, his smile was calm and full of pride. He walked to the stage beneath a canopy of white roses, the same kind that had fallen on Bella that night. He began speaking, his voice steady and warm. He said that a year ago, he had seen a woman standing alone, holding a child, fighting a world that refused to see her worth. He said he had watched her rise again, not with bitterness, but with grace, teaching him what true strength looked like. The crowd listened in silence. Even the children stopped playing. Then he turned toward Bella, his eyes soft but unwavering. He said he had once lost faith in love, but she had shown him that love was not about perfection, it was about staying when others walked away. He stepped down from the stage, reached into his pocket, and knelt before her. Bella's breath caught. The world seemed to slow. Alexander opened a small velvet box, revealing a ring that glowed faintly under the golden light. He said she had given his son back his smile, and had given him something even greater, faith. He asked her if she would marry him, not out of pity or need, but out of love reborn from pain. For a moment, Bella could not speak. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at Ella, who nodded eagerly, her small hand clutching Ryan's. Bella whispered yes, and the word carried through the crowd like a promise finally kept. Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, his hand trembling just slightly. Ryan lifted Ella and grinned for the first time in years. He told her it looked like he finally had a little sister. The crowd laughed softly, and Bella smiled through her tears. The garden lights shimmered like stars, wrapping the scene in warmth. That night, under the same white roses that had once witnessed her humiliation, Bella found something she never thought she'd have again. Not wealth, not status, but a family, a place to belong. 6 months later, Bella Reed stood before a group of women in a sunlit hall. The Hope Foundation had become her life's work, a place where single mothers found support, training, and dignity. On the wall behind her, a simple quote read, "Every ending can become a beginning." She smiled as she watched a young woman receive her first paycheck, remembering the nights she once cried in silence, afraid she'd never rise again. That afternoon, a visitor waited in the office. Miranda Whitmore looked smaller somehow, her elegant posture replaced by humility. She held a simple purse and wore no jewelry. Her voice trembled when she said she had come to apologize. She told Bella that pride had destroyed her family and warned her not to repeat her mistakes. Bella listened quietly, then said forgiveness was not weakness but freedom. She meant it, and for the first time, Miranda seemed to believe her. The older woman nodded, eyes wet, and whispered a thank you before leaving. That evening, the Reed home glowed with the warmth of candlelight. Alexander poured wine while Ryan helped Ella with her napkin. Bella watched them, her heart full and still. The laughter at the table was gentle, unforced, the kind that comes when wounds have finally healed. Ella leaned against Alexander, calling him Dad, and Ryan looked at Bella with the quiet gratitude of someone who had found peace again. As the night deepened, Bella's voice carried softly in reflection. She said that for the first time, she wasn't someone's burden, she was someone's home. She looked around the table and realized healing didn't erase the past. It simply made space for love to grow where pain once lived. The candles flickered like tiny stars, and in that light, everything felt whole again. Sometimes life doesn't take from us. It clears the space for something better to grow. I once thought losing everything meant the end of my story. But now I know it was only the beginning. I lost the home I thought I wanted, the love I thought I needed, and the people I thought would protect me. And in that emptiness, I found myself. I found love that stayed, family that healed, and a peace that didn't depend on anyone's approval. If you're listening right now, I hope you remember this. You are not what they say you are. You are what you choose to become after the world tries to break you. Sometimes one brave choice can change everything. So keep standing, keep believing, and don't let anyone convince you that you're less than enough. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to remember their worth today. Like, subscribe, and join us here at Emotional Echoes for more stories of hope, love, and redemption. Thank you for listening, And remember, you are enough, exactly as you are.